Zombies. Mummies. The overwhelming sense of distress that being in the wrong body causes to one's mental, physical, and emotional health. Skeletons. These are all struggles that many trans people deal with on a daily basis, especially mummies. Just leave me alone. Can I be honest for a second? And look, just between you and me, I'm not very good with horror movies. I swear, there's like a live action Scooby-Doo movie where they go to unmask a villain, but it turns out it was an actual zombie and they take the head clean off. For the life of me, I can't find that anywhere, but it's remained in my mind as a core childhood fear. We're gonna keep this between us though, right? Okay, good. And when Fred and Daphne switched bodies, I definitely felt something. Sorry, I thought we were just being open here. Horror as a genre has always been really interesting to me, and I've been watching from the sidelines for quite some time. Genuinely, I think the first horror movie I ever saw in theaters was Five Nights at Freddy's. Now, body horror, also known as biological horror, if you think you're some kind of film critic, is a specific subgenre of horror that's always been of a particular interest to me. In a general sense, this subgenre encapsulates all things weird with the human body and portraying them in a way that is unnerving, gross, and almost foreign to make the viewer uncomfortable. See, the one thing that ties us to the horror in this portrayal of the human body is the fact that we all have one, like it or not. That shared connection grounds the terror back to reality in a way I feel a lot of other genres sometimes lack. Your own body you can touch, you can see, and your mind inevitably starts projecting what you see on the screen to your own self. And this is what really gets under my skin. Laugh. These films know exactly what they're doing, and they know exactly how to be grounded in reality just enough to make you shudder. Ricky Hirsch made an amazing video on just how gay horror films are, and one thing that she mentioned in that video that really stuck with me is how horror is a genre that is heavily defined by historical context. You can tell a lot about any particular junction in history by looking at what scared people at that time. We can go back as far as you want. Frankenstein is about a creature of the unknown, or if you want to look at it through a queer lens, two men having a kid. Point is, what's weird, what's unknown, what's going against the grain is what scares people. This shared fear is what brings people together, but at the same time, it's often off the basis of excluding and alienating the ones that they're scared of. Okay, but where does body horror slot in all this? Well, I wouldn't say there was like one central point where body horror became the norm. Rather, it's always been present in a lot of these films, we just didn't have the word for it yet. Most will cite 1958's The Blob or The Fly as a sort of catalyst for this genre of film cementing itself in the minds of a wider audience, but once again, we can go back further. Freaks released in 1932 and showed a bunch of people with physical disabilities and was deemed too explicit for the time and ended up getting banned. Franz Kafka's novel released in 1915, The Metamorphosis, shows us Gregor Samsa waking up in the body of a cockroach, unable to return to his human self. And as the novel progresses, Samsa fears that he's losing sight of his old self, and the people around him begin to abandon him, leading him to ultimately starving himself to death. For some reason, this is my girlfriend's favorite novel. She also told me to remove all the raid from the apartment and all the furniture and to not take the trash out. I don't know, she can be weird like that. Anyways, body horror comes in so many different forms that it's almost impossible to categorize them all. However, there's a lot that you might not even consider at first. There's the obvious stuff like Saw, the Human Centipede, and torture porn films where the body is actively being harmed or shown in a grotesque manner, but also things I never really thought of through this lens, like Jennifer's Body and Ginger Snaps. These films, and ones like them, often portray a character going through some sort of forced transformation that is unnerving to watch, and generally this is how I think about the genre today. It's become really mainstream with werewolf, vampire, and zombies films being a staple of the 2010s. Hell, even anime and manga have been doing it forever with films like Akira in the 80s and all of Junji Ito's works over the last 30 years or so. Now, I love Jujutsu Kaisen, and I swear this is relevant. I think Mahito is a really cool, well-designed character. He has this look and personality that exudes this sly confidence, and the strength of his curse technique only adds to this. He's able to manipulate someone's soul just by touching them, then transfigure them into any shape or form that he sees fit. Despite how cool I think he is, this ability has always made me super uncomfortable. The idea that your body can be manipulated into a form that you have zero control over and all you could do is watch and accept the fact that this idealized version of you is gone? A lot of us have already gone through that terrifying experience, and some of us live in fear of it. Let's talk about the body horror and puberty. Look, I may be 20 now, but I swear I'm just a late bloomer. I can't be 5'7" forever. That's right between the two most embarrassing heights to be. Making Media Matter made a great video about the evolution of horror with all its queerness, and one part that really spoke to me was in the first section about using puberty in this way. For trans and gender non-conforming individuals, it is very easy to feel that the physical vessel is a prison of sorts, changing or attempting to change in a way you don't want it to. There's nothing scarier than enduring the wrong puberty, and horror is a genre that understands this horrifying side of puberty completely. A film like Jennifer's Body presents growing into womanhood through the lens of a teenage girl getting possessed by a demon and having to eat men to survive. To attract these men, she has to maintain her looks and reputation, and the metaphor kinda can't be any more in your face. Looking at the flip side, I think the most obvious portrayal of a male puberty is in 1973's interpretation of The Boy Who Cried Werewolf. Our main character gets bitten by a werewolf, later during a full moon he begins to transform, and he looks absolutely horrified at what he's become and runs into the woods, leading to his eventual death. Sorry, that's spoilers. But there's often been a correlation between trans people and a fascination with films that share themes with the ones mentioned prior. It's sort of tough for me to try to communicate these feelings of being trapped in your own body by providing non-personal examples and generalizations, so let's get to know each other a little bit. Obviously, I'm providing a trans femme point of view, but you get the picture. I still remember sometime in middle school when I started to get hair on my upper lip and everywhere else, but one part that particularly bothered me was my legs. It got to a point where I completely stopped wearing shorts because of how much I hated the way my legs looked. When I spoke to an adult I trusted at the time, they pretty much just told me to get over it. It is how it is. I couldn't bear it anymore, so one evening while leaving work, I sheepishly picked up a razor from the women's beauty section and shuffled my way through self-checkout. I still remember the feeling of getting out of the shower and having one leg completely bare, while the other one was almost foreign to me. It felt so much better to not have that weighing me down mentally anymore. While puberty itself is a process that takes many years to fully run its course, and even longer to try to undo, the sudden transformation seen in these films often offer scenes that are just as jarring to anyone watching. Cis people, predominantly cis men, make these movies because I imagine to some degree for them, there is no greater threat than your body working directly against you, making you into something monstrous. While yes, puberty doesn't turn you into a literal monster, except in my case where I was a 14-year-old boy with access to Discord and Reddit, for trans people it creates this sort of divide between how you are inside and how the world around you perceives you. If you go against the norms that are put in place by society around you, they do, however, start to view you as some sort of monster. I watched a few different films for this video that had trans women as main villains, but I don't think any of them paint a better picture of just how trans people have been viewed over the last few decades than that of Buffalo Bill from The Silence of the Lambs. I'd never seen this film before, and let me just say, it was really good. I read up on some feminist viewings of this film and other horror films in general, ladies, hit my DMs, and ignoring Buffalo Bill for 1 second, I think this film portrays some of women's struggles in a very upfront way through Clarice. One scene that made me shudder is when she's alone in this room full of male officers. While she does technically have authority over them, you could tell that no one in that room respects her in a way that they would of a male of the same rank. While girls unfortunately have to learn this sort of thing growing up, a lot of guys probably never even consider the fact that women experience this sort of treatment every day of their lives. It was always, in the back of my mind, but now experiencing that firsthand, it's fucking terrifying. Going back to Bill as a character, they're so in your face with the stereotypes of trans women that you see in media nowadays, pretty much embodying what every trans woman dreads the most, and that's getting accused of dressing as a woman to fulfill some sort of sexual fantasy. Bill applies her makeup, puts on women's jewelry, and we even see them tuck in a scene that I can't show here, and it's clear what the film is trying to portray them as. Autogynephilia is thrown around pretty much just to diminish trans women's identities, and in characters like Bill, like Angela from Sleepaway Camp, like Bobby from Dressed to Kill, being trans is equated with a mental disorder that causes one to be violent and pretty much lose all their morals. This representation of trans women in horror has real world implications. It leads to people thinking of trans women as less than human because in their minds, they've become monstrous things made of only the object. Misguided views like these lead to violence in the real world, as evidenced by the alarming murder rate of trans folks, especially trans women of color. I know that in the very short time I've been a trans creator online, I've already experienced my fair share of getting called mentally ill, getting told I should kill myself or deserve to be killed, and a ton of other awful things, but the only question I have is, for what? I'm almost certain a majority of these people have never actually interacted with a trans person in real life, and it's not worth my time to pay them any mind, but isn't it apparent how these extreme viewings of characters like Buffalo Bill bleed into the real world? Trans people don't only find solidarity in characters undergoing monstrous changes because of the physical, but also how these characters are treated by the people around them. Let's look at Frankenstein again. He was born, in a sense, to two men, and looks very out of place to the world around him. The townsfolk shun him and treat him like a creature that was never supposed to exist, that goes against everything that is believed what a person should be. Do I even have to say how this relates to trans people? In One Piece, once again, I swear this is relevant. During the Enies Lobby arc, Robin is treated like a demon for just being alive, and thus she believes the world would be a better place if she were to just die. We get the iconic scene of her screaming that she wants to live after being told by Frankie and the rest of the Straw Hats that no, her existence isn't a sin. There's no crime in living. Am I using One Piece for supporting evidence of an extremely serious point that has real-world ramifications in a video dedicated to horror film? Yeah. Yeah, I am. Unfortunately, this cycle of hatred for people who are out of the ordinary is par for the course for whatever minority group is getting thrust into the political limelight at the time. And it's really not something that just goes away. To end this segment and transition, laugh, and I Saw the TV Glow, I want to close with this. I don't think films like The Fly or most other monsters transformation films are really intended to portray the trans experience in particular, but I do think they're ultimately thrusting just how icky and gross and scary and ugly and binding the human body can be by amplifying it in all of its icky, gross, scary, ugly bindingness to the extreme. It just so happens that trans people already see the body in this light. While generally speaking, a cis person may project what's happening in The Fly to themselves and feel grossed out, a trans person doesn't have to project. They're simply watching a representation of what they experience every single day. I hate doing this, but it would really mean a lot if you hit all the funny buttons down below, and I just wanted to shout out that I opened channel memberships as well as a Ko-Fi page if you wanted to help support me directly. Obviously, don't feel like you have to. Thanks again. Means a lot. Let me be honest, and contrary to all the funny jokes I retweet, I Saw the TV Glow didn't really hit me that hard. I think this is fully due to the fact that I'm already transing my gender, but I just know that if I had seen this film like a year or two ago, it would have broke me. This isn't sponsored or anything, but I'm about to spoil the whole film, so if you haven't seen it, please give it a watch. I think it came out on Max recently. You can rent or buy it digitally, but personally, I'm a physical media type gal, and the Blu-ray is super cool to have. Relating gender back to body horror, specifically in I Saw the TV Glow, was actually a lot harder than I thought it was. Mainly because it's so real. There's no crazy monster transformations, no riots of people shunning the villain we're rooting for. No, this film isn't an, you got me kind of scary. It's an, oh, fuck, you got me. I'm gonna have to think about this one later. Kind of scary. I mean, it's no surprise that this movie is about being trans. Come on, the parachute didn't just fucking do that. But trying to hone on specifically the horror found in one's body was a little tougher than the other examples I showcased. But first, let's get some background stuff out of the way. I Saw the TV Glow first premiered at Sundance earlier this year, later releasing in select theaters around May. Written and directed by Jane Schobrin and distributed by A24, this is the second film they had both written and directed. To be a nerd for a sec, I love that this film was shot on 35mm film. It makes all the colors look absolutely beautiful, and it's just not really something that you can recreate to this extent on digital. It also reinforces this overwhelming nostalgic feel the film has, and it really does feel like you'd pop this on with a VHS player. I do think the formal elements at play only emphasize the themes present, but before I turn this into an essay for my film aesthetics class, let's actually get into the plot. We follow our main character and occasional narrator, Owen, as she grows up in a nondescript suburb during the 90s. We open on her watching TV at night and watching an ad for a show named The Pink Opaque. Owen, as seen in these opening scenes, about 12 or 13-year-old, is a really cute kid. She seems to enjoy her life for the most part, and that's portrayed through the bright colors and the fact that she's almost always front and center in the frame. We're then introduced to Maddie, a slightly older girl who is dripping with T-boy swag. She's obsessed with the Pink Opaque that was mentioned earlier and begins to fill Owen in on it, eventually leading her to inviting Owen over since she's still not allowed to stay up past her bedtime. When Owen eventually comes over and watches the show for the first time, she is hooked. The Pink Opaque is about two girls, Isabel and Tara, as they use their psychic abilities to communicate and fight the monster of the week, with the big bad Mr. Melancholy always looming over their heads. After the episode, Maddie and Owen talk for a bit, and more is revealed about both of these characters. I love how this scene is lit. It reminds me exactly of how staying at my friend's house felt when I was little. The set is so well dressed. I feel like lived in and, sorry, when they're talking, it's very clear that Owen is not knowledgeable on the show at all, and when she doesn't understand and apologizes for it, Maddie says,
"Don't apologize."
These are words that Owen needs to take to heart. As Owen starts to turn in for the night, Maddie stops on the stairs and talks about how the show feels more real than real life. We're then shown 2 years later, and while Owen is still usually the center point of the frame, she's delegated more to being in the middle ground, and in her dark clothes stands out from the bright colors of the world around her. It just so happens that this is also when we start to see her take a more backseat approach to life. It's implied, and then a little later stated, that her mother is having some health issues and this is obviously taking a toll on the both of them. Another really telling shot is on this park bench where Owen is almost getting pushed out of the frame. Not because her mother is supposed to be the focal point, but rather to show her distance from herself mentally. In the car, Owen asks her mom if she can stay up late to watch The Pink Opaque, which airs at 10:30. Her mother, not really wanting to cause any conflict, deflects this request and reminds her that her bedtime is 10:15. We then get the only line of dialogue from Owen's father, and to any trans sims watching, they are absolutely bone-chilling.
Isn't that a show for girls?
It's less horror and more dread, if anything. I remember when I was little playing Gmod on my dad's old Mac, and I happened to be playing as some girl skin. My dad came in and I wanted to show him something I had made, and then the camera switched to third person and he asked, "Why are you playing as a girl?" A harmless question, but one that made me panic nonetheless as I tried to make up some fake ass answer. Every element of this film is harboring back to these shared experiences, whether that be the pink opaque and all its Buffy the Vampire Slayer callbacks, scenes like I had just mentioned, or just the general vibe of the film set in the 90s and early 2000s. The camera follows Owen into school while she explains that since she still isn't allowed to watch the pink opaque, Maddie had started saving these episodes on VHS tapes for her to pick up after school. There's this really cute collage type thing on screen while Owen is walking, and the line that sticks out to me the most is Isabel and Tara are like family to me. We'll see more of this a little later, but I think one of the biggest themes this film is presenting is that of chosen family. Both Owen and Maddie are really unhappy with their lives, and through this love for the show, they're not only able to form a connection with each other, but also the characters in the show. That said, Owen and Maddie aren't really that close, and the first time we see them together on screen after they first hang out, it's clear that they've both lived some life between that time. Maddie goes on to tell Owen how she got outed at the school as a lesbian and how she hates it here. Owen asks if she can come over again to watch the pink opaque as it airs that Saturday night. Maddie then says in response that she is a lesbian and not interested if Owen has some ulterior motive, which she clearly doesn't. When Maddie asks her if she likes boys or girls, she's taken aback for a second, and after a pause that feels like an eternity, has this to say.
I don't know.
Boys?
I think that I like TV shows. When I think about that stuff, it feels like someone took a shovel and dug out all of my insides, and I know there's nothing in there, but I'm still too nervous to open myself up and check.
I'll only give you the play-by-play of this scene because I think it is so unbelievably telling about Owen's character, and you can infer a lot about her by this reply. Firstly, looking more so at a surface level, you might take away the fact that Owen may be aro ace, which is what I thought initially. Of course, there's nothing wrong with that takeaway, and if you find comfort in that, that's great. However, I will raise you what I think this reply is really trying to say. Daniel Porfetta made an analysis of this film, and what he says about the scene pretty much sums up my thoughts exactly. If a person is a woman trapped in a man's body, wouldn't that make the idea of having sex while being perceived as a man difficult, frightening, and dysphoria-causing? Owen's romantic and sexual desires are intact, but greatly inhibited by the body that she was born into. I know that before I transitioned, I would often get called asexual by other guys, maybe in a mean way, but more in a you never join in on sex topics kind of way. It wasn't until I started transitioning that I finally started feeling comfortable with my sexuality, and I know exactly how Owen feels here. The main difference is that I, and many others like me, eventually confront this and figure out what makes us feel off. Owen, on the other hand, is too comfortable becoming invisible to the world around her. She is someone who not only doesn't have the words to explain how she feels, but almost no desire either. Owen and Maddie watch the pink opaque together in a scene that mirrors the one from a couple years prior, and while Owen is turning in for the night, Maddie stops on the stairs again. She tells Owen how she'll die if she stays here any longer and plans on running away and wants her to come with. We then get the sequence that is honestly the most sexually tense in the film of Maddie drawing a little ghost from the pink opaque onto Owen's neck. While this is not an inherently scary scene, the amount of tension and dread I had while watching, once again, this comes from that idea of shared experiences. I was so expecting a parent to come downstairs and yell at Maddie or something. It's similar to that feeling you get when you're putting on your boy or girl clothes and hear footsteps coming towards your room. I learned the patterns of all the people's footsteps in my house and vowed to never wear headphones when dressing film because of a few close calls I had. While they're falling asleep downstairs, we see TV static above Owen's head as she's thinking. And the way I read this is that the TV static represents the thoughts that she's been trying to repress. There's further evidence later on, but I would imagine these thoughts to be related to the idea of not wanting to take a look inside yourself and find out what's wrong, and that terrifies her. The next morning, Maddie is dead set on leaving as soon as possible, and it's clear that Owen is not on board. She goes to a friend's house to tell her friend's mom everything that's been going on, but then we skip ahead a few weeks, and Maddie is gone, leaving only a burning CRT in her place. The next time jump, 8 years later, made me so sad. She has a job at a local movie theater now, and the framing of the shots only exemplify how invisible she's become in the eyes of everyone around her. I don't think for this whole section she's ever in the same frame as someone else. Not only the colors she wears, but the environment around her starts to get darker and drearier. The scene where she's on break with her coworkers makes me so uncomfortable. I remember getting seen as one of the guys at work while I would sit there in awkward silence while they talk about women in ways that could only be described as absolutely disgusting. A little while later, while Owen is slipping into the mundanity of her everyday life, she's out grocery shopping. And then someone appears.
Buddy, where have you been?
Maddie takes Owen out to a bar to talk about the discoveries she's made. When we first see the bar, it opens with a band performing on stage, and I only mention this one, because I really like the song, but two, because I think the song could tell us sort of what's been happening between Owen and Maddie. This song, named Claw Machine by Sloppy Jane and Phoebe Bridgers, has a particular line that's really stuck out to me.
He's going home to a manicured lawn and digging holes in his manicured lawn.
I could be missing the mark entirely, but I think this calls back to whatever Maddie is in Owen's life. It causes Owen to dig up things that she doesn't want to think about. She tries so hard to just let things be how they are and have this exterior of everything being fine, but then Maddie comes along and messes it all up. Owen pleads with Maddie to turn herself into the police, but Maddie isn't interested. She tells Owen that the Pink Opaque is more than just a TV show. We're shown scattered scenes that are implied to have been on the same night as we last saw them together, of Owen dressed as Isabel. I absolutely adore this shot of Owen being out of focus in the mirror, where the viewer is only able to see Maddie's reaction of joy and excitement. While the following shot doesn't exactly show a beaming Owen, I know that look when I've seen it. I've seen it staring back at me far too many times. Maddie tells Owen how time is now moving differently, and between the glowing ghost in the back of her neck and literally having Mr. Melancholy in the moon, it's quite apparent that something supernatural is occurring here. Owen, quite frankly, doesn't seem to want anything to do with this out of fear for leaving her content life. And we're shown more scenes of the Pink Opaque and how the final season, season 5, came to an end before getting canceled. Isabel gets kidnapped by Mr. Melancholy, gets her heart ripped out, and is forced to drink his Luna juice. This Luna juice puts you into what's known as the Midnight Realm, or a hellish nightmare that you have no hope of escaping. This nightmare is actually shown to us through a snow globe, mimicking the opening shot of the film. Isabel then gets buried alive, and that's it. That's the end of the Pink Opaque. Owen falls into the TV screaming that this isn't her home, that she wants to go back, and in this moment of realization, it's clear that Owen isn't who she thinks he is. But once again, Owen doesn't want to leave her content life. It's easy to watch this and keep saying, please, for the love of God, please just confront it. But it's really not that easy for a lot of people. Owen promised to meet Maddie at the school while we were at the bar, and this shot right here I think is so impactful. We see Owen just staring at her chest now full of hair, knowing that she will have to confront that part of herself again in order to see Maddie, and she just doesn't want to. This is puberty as body horror. Seeing how much she's changed, you can obviously tell she is not happy with it. Comparing her expression in this scene to this one, it really can't be any more obvious. They meet in a blow-up planetarium type thing in the school where Maddie basically provides all the evidence that Owen needs to hear in order to understand that no, this life she's living right now, it can't last. She is dying. Bridget Lundy Payne, who plays Maddie, does such an amazing job performing their monologue in this series of extremely long takes. The long take here being used to give a sense of time and how it really feels to be Owen in this moment. In fact, we don't even see Owen until the end of this scene. Maddie goes on to tell Owen how she paid someone to bury her alive and the horrifying experience that came from it. But when she came to, she realized that Maddie wasn't real at all. And in fact, they were both trapped in the Midnight Realm. She takes Owen onto the football field and says how she has a burial site ready, and all that needs to happen for Owen to be finally free is to shed this self. It was during this walk on the football field that when I was first watching the film, I got it. Embarrassingly, it took me a little bit, but I remember pausing and just saying, oh, fuck. So that's why, oh, that's what it means. Oh. Owen, as Owen does, pushes Maddie away and runs home. This is the last time we see Maddie. Owen turns to the camera and says how she wishes that Maddie would come back and force her into finally confronting herself, but that day never comes. There is still time. A statement that rings true for anyone at any stage in their life. It is never too late to start being who you know who you are. It's just about being able to take that first step. Owen never does. She still lives in the same house that she grew up in, and the only things that have changed are the fact that she got a bigger TV and started working at an entertainment center. As the title 20 years later hits the screen, I feel absolutely terrible. Owen is in such an awful shape, desperately clinging on to whatever sense of self she feels she has left, but once again, she is dying. This finally comes to a head when, while singing Happy Birthday for Some Kids, she snaps, screaming at the top of her lungs, realizing that she is trapped, that she is dying, that time itself isn't going to wait for her, and everything freezes. We're given a scene of Owen in the bathroom after the fact, cutting herself open with a box cutter, but nothing comes out. She pulls open her chest in the mirror to find only TV static. Just like she had said almost 30 years prior, there's nothing inside. She goes back to work to apologize, but no one pays her any mind. This is the life she's built for herself. A life of being in the background. Body horror doesn't have to be extreme to be effective. Hell, I think something like I Saw the TV Glow is the scariest example of all, because we've all been Owen, letting the weight of the world crush and mold you into someone content with the world around them in order to try to survive. Going back to that Daniel Perfetta video from earlier, he says this: imagine compromising everything just because other people were a little uncomfortable, repressing every other element of what makes you you, just so it's a little bit easier for the people who supposedly love you. You think you're making it easier on yourself by making it easier for everyone else, but this couldn't be further from the truth. This is something I still struggle with every day of my life. Head pointed down at the sidewalk going to class, avoiding eye contact, and never telling anyone my preferred pronouns and going by my birth name. I don't want to be the odd one out, but it gets to a point where I once again have to ask, for what? In an interview Jane did with The New Yorker, they said, the disassociation, the hiding in stories and hiding in fandom, was a survival tool. You're protecting yourself from yourself to not have your entire concept of home destroyed. They talk about how you don't owe anyone your patience, and if your family, the ones who are supposed to love you, suddenly stop, that's their loss. Once again, this is a lot easier said than done. Some folks are not in positions where coming out is a viable option. I'm forever grateful for my position, living with a good friend of mine away from home, but I still instinctively look over at my door whenever I'm changing, careful to not get caught. Jane began writing I Saw the TV Glow after being on HRT for 3 months, and reading that made me smile, because I had begun writing the script for Why Are Fighting Games So Gay at the exact same point in my transition. If it weren't for that video, I honestly don't know where I'd be at right now. There is still time. I have a cute little thing in my phone case with it on it, but I always feel like I was wasting my days away. These days where I was supposed to be happier now always felt short of what I had hoped. Now getting to do this as my job while going to school was tough, don't get me wrong, but getting to talk to people about these things that mattered to me helped me finally confront parts of myself that I had been pushing down forever. While I still take things one day at a time, finally having agency in my own path of life is something I had never felt before. We've all been Owen. Being Owen isn't a bad thing, and I would even say that being Owen is the human thing, but at a certain point, you have to realize that you're the only one who can steer your life in the direction that you want. Repression is not having the words to describe what you need. Agency is taking those words and actually doing something with them. There are people everywhere that are willing to help, but only you can take that terrifying first step to ask for it. Thank you for watching. I was gonna make a callback to that mummy joke from earlier, but I didn't feel right, so here's that. This is such a stupid... I'm gonna have to clean this up and I have to explain to Dax why half of our toilet... Why did I think this was a good idea? Okay, well, it's lost. That's the joke. It's lost.